What if I told you that somewhere in your city, there's a staircase that appears only at 2:47 a.m., a staircase that leads to floors that don't exist in any building blueprint? Tonight, I'll tell you about Marcus Rivera, an urban explorer who discovered that some staircases don't just go up or down. They go somewhere else entirely. This is the legend of the Phantom 13th floor, and after hearing this story, you'll never look at emergency staircases the same way again. The discovery Marcus Rivera had been urban exploring for 8 years. Abandoned hospitals, forgotten subway tunnels, derelict factories. He documented them all for his photography blog. But nothing had prepared him for what he would find in the Meridian Tower, a 45-story office building in downtown that had been abandoned mid-construction in 2019. The building was supposed to have been demolished, but legal disputes had left it standing, a concrete skeleton against the city skyline. Marcus had heard rumors among the urban exploration community about strange occurrences in the building. Security guards reported hearing footsteps on floors that had no flooring. Construction workers claimed to see lights moving in windows of floors that had no electricity. Sound, wind whistling through empty building structures on a cold February night. Marcus entered the building through a gap in the ground floor security fencing. His goal was simple: reach the top floor and capture sunrise photos of the city. He began climbing the emergency staircase, his headlamp cutting through the darkness. The first 20 floors were exactly what he expected: concrete steps, metal railings, the occasional graffiti tag from other explorers. But as he reached the 21st floor, Marcus noticed something odd. The staircase continued upward, even though the building plans he'd studied showed only 20 floors completed. Curious, he kept climbing. Chapter 2. The impossible architecture. Floor 22 was different. Instead of the bare concrete and exposed rebar of the lower levels, this floor was finished. Polished marble floors, mahogany doors with brass nameplates, soft lighting that seemed to have no visible source. The air smelled of expensive cologne and fresh coffee, as if people had just been working here moments before. Marcus checked his watch, 2:47 a.m. He photographed everything, his camera flash revealing details that his eyes had missed in the dim lighting. The nameplates on the doors showed companies that didn't exist: Temporal Dynamics LLC, Yesterday Associates, the Department of Lost Hours. Sound, soft office ambience, distant typing, phones ringing, but the most unsettling detail was the elevator. The indicator above the door showed that it was moving, stopping at floors 25, 27, 30, floors that, according to every building plan Marcus had seen, didn't exist. He tried one of the office doors. It opened into a fully furnished workspace. Computers still warm, coffee still steaming in a mug that read "World's Best Dad." Family photos on the desk showed a man, woman, and 2 children at what looked like a company picnic. But the photos were dated 2031. The other workers, as Marcus explored more offices, he began to hear sounds. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, muffled conversations behind closed doors. But whenever he tried to open those doors, they were locked. The sounds would stop the moment his hand touched the doorknob, as if the people inside were holding their breath, waiting for him to leave. On floor 25, Marcus encountered his first worker. She was a woman in her 30s, wearing a business suit that looked like it was from the 1980s. She was standing at a copy machine, feeding papers through it in a repetitive motion. When Marcus called out to her, she turned around. Her face was normal except for her eyes. They were completely white, as if cataracts had claimed her vision entirely. Sound, copy machine running, papers shuffling mechanically. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice echoing strangely in the finished office space. "What company is this? How long have you been working here?" The woman smiled, but it was wrong, too wide, lasting too long. "I've been working here since 1987, she said in a voice that sounded like it was coming from an old radio transmission. "Every night, 2:47 a.m. to 6:15 a.m. Same shift, same job. The work is very important." "What kind of work?" Marcus asked, but the woman had already turned back to the copy machine, feeding the same blank sheets of paper through it over and over again. The pattern: as Marcus climbed higher, he encountered more workers. A man in floor 27 who had been typing the same sentence for decades. The project must be completed by morning. A woman on floor 30 who answered phones that never rang, taking messages for people who would never receive them. An entire floor of accountants who calculated budgets for companies that had never existed. All of them shared the same characteristics: outdated clothing, white eyes, and the insistence that their work was very important and must be completed by morning. Sound: multiple office sounds layering, phones, typing, copying, all slightly out of sync. Marcus began to document everything with his camera, but when he reviewed the photos, something disturbing emerged. The timestamps on his photos were wrong. According to his camera, he had been in the building for 3 hours, but his watch showed only 20 minutes had passed since he'd entered the 22nd floor. Time, Marcus realized, worked differently in the phantom floors. The research disturbed by what he'd seen, Marcus returned home and began researching the Meridian Tower's history. What he found explained everything and nothing at all. The original Meridian Tower had been completed in 1987, a 45-story office building that had been the pride of the downtown district. But on November 15, 1987, something had gone wrong. At exactly 2:47 a.m., during the overnight shift, the building had experienced what official reports called a structural anomaly. Sound: old news broadcasts, papers rustling. According to witness reports, the building had folded in on itself for exactly 3 hours and 28 minutes. When the anomaly ended at 6:15 a.m., the building was empty. No bodies were found, no signs of evacuation. The 847 people who had been working the overnight shift had simply vanished. The building was demolished within the year, but construction workers reported strange occurrences during the demolition. They would arrive at the job site to find offices perfectly furnished on floors they had demolished the day before. Equipment would be moved during the night. Some workers claimed to see people in business attire walking through walls that no longer existed. The current Meridian Tower had been built on the same site, but construction was halted when workers began disappearing during the overnight shifts. Always at 2:47 a.m. Always for exactly 3 hours and 28 minutes. The return despite every logical part of his brain telling him to stay away. Marcus returned to the building the next night. This time, he brought additional equipment: multiple cameras, a GPS device, and a two-way radio to communicate with his girlfriend Sarah, who was monitoring from outside the building. He also brought something else: a 1987 employee directory for the original Meridian Tower that he'd found in archived city records. Sound: radio static, distant voices as he climbed past the 20th floor. His radio connection with Sarah became increasingly distorted. By floor 22, it was nothing but static. His GPS device showed his location as coordinates not found. This time, Marcus had a plan. He would try to communicate with the phantom workers to understand what had happened to them and why they were still there. On floor 25, he found the woman at the copy machine again. But this time, he noticed details he'd missed before. The papers she was copying weren't blank. They were architectural blueprints. Blueprints for floors that extended infinitely upward. "What's your name?" Marcus asked gently. The woman paused in her copying. "Linda," she said without turning around. "Linda Morrison, Architectural Department. I've been working on the expansion project since... She trailed off, and Marcus checked the employee directory. Linda Morrison, Architectural Department, hired 1985, listed among the missing. The truth: as Marcus interviewed more phantom workers, a horrible picture began to emerge. None of them remembered disappearing. From their perspective, they had never stopped working. November 15th, 1987, had become an endless loop for them. The same night shift, repeated for over 30 years. But they weren't ghosts in the traditional sense. They were living people, trapped in a temporal anomaly that kept them working the same shift over and over again, aging but never aging, existing but never truly living. Sound, clock ticking, getting louder and more distorted. The phantom floors weren't just architecturally impossible. They were temporally impossible. The building existed in a time loop, accessible only during the exact hours when the original anomaly had occurred, 2:47 a.m. to 6:15 a.m. Marcus realized he was in terrible danger. According to his camera's timestamp, he had been in the building for 2 hours and 45 minutes. If the time loop reset at 6:15 a.m., would he be trapped like the others? The escape panicking, Marcus ran for the emergency staircase, but when he reached where floor 21 should have been, he found only another flight of stairs leading upward. The building was reorganizing itself, trying to trap him in the loop. As he climbed, more phantom workers appeared in the stairwell. They were all smiling their two wide smiles, their white eyes reflecting his flashlight beam. "The work is very important," they said in unison. "It must be completed by morning. Stay and help us. We've been waiting so long for new employees." Sound, footsteps echoing, getting faster, overlapping voices. Marcus pushed through them. They felt real but cold, like walking through refrigerated air. He climbed floor after floor, but instead of reaching the top of the building, he seemed to be climbing deeper into the anomaly. Floor numbers became increasingly impossible. 67, 89, 143. Finally, in desperation, Marcus smashed through a window and looked outside. The city was there, but it was wrong. The skyline showed buildings that had been demolished decades ago, alongside structures that wouldn't be built for years to come. Different eras of the city's architecture existed simultaneously. He checked his watch, 6:14 a.m. With 1 minute left, Marcus did the only thing he could think of. He stopped trying to go down and instead climbed up as fast as possible. If the building was caught in a time loop, maybe he could climb out of it entirely. Chapter 9. The resolution at 6:15 a.m. exactly. Marcus found himself standing on the 20th floor of the abandoned Meridian Tower, the real 20th floor, with its concrete walls and exposed rebar. His radio crackled back to life, with Sarah's frantic voice calling his name. According to Sarah, Marcus had been silent for exactly 3 hours and 28 minutes. According to his own experience, he had been climbing for what felt like hours through impossible architecture. Sound. Normal building sounds returning, radio static clearing, but Marcus wasn't the same. In his camera, he had hundreds of photos of the phantom floors and their workers. More importantly, he had evidence of what had happened to the 847 missing people from 1987. The warning Marcus published his findings, but as expected, most people dismissed them as an elaborate hoax. The photos could have been digitally manipulated. The employee directory could have been forged. Urban legends, skeptics said, were just stories people told to make boring reality more interesting. But Marcus knew better. He also knew he couldn't go back. Something about his visit had changed him. He aged faster now, as if his body was trying to catch up with the time he'd spent in the loop. His hair went gray within months. His hands developed the slight tremor of someone much older. Sound, soft, melancholy music, and sometimes, late at night, Marcus would get phone calls. No one would speak, but in the background he could hear the familiar sounds of the phantom floors. Keyboards clicking, copy machines running, phones ringing in offices that existed outside of time. Epilogue. The cycle continues. The Meridian Tower still stands, officially abandoned, officially empty. But construction workers in the area report strange occurrences. Lights in impossible floors. Elevators that stop at floors that don't exist. Security guards who quit after their first overnight shift, claiming they heard hundreds of people working in a building that was supposed to be empty. And urban explorers still try to reach the phantom floors. Most find nothing but empty concrete and darkness. But a few, those who arrive at exactly the right time, discover that some office buildings never really close. They just keep working the night shift forever. Sound. Clock striking 2:47 a.m. Office sounds beginning to fade in final hook. The next time you're working late in an office building, pay attention to the sounds around you after 2:47 a.m. Those footsteps in the stairwell, that elevator stopping at floors that shouldn't exist, those voices from the office next door that's supposed to be empty. Ask yourself, are you sure you're working the day shift? Or have you become part of night shift that never ends? And remember, if you ever find yourself in a staircase that has more floors than it should, don't keep climbing up. Sometimes the only way out is through.